Jerome was fired without reason on the day he expected a promotion, simply because he was black. 2 years later, he returned to the same company as its owner, ready to change everything. His response to past injustice shocked everyone. But let's start from the beginning. Jerome Williams began his day confident that success awaited him. The day before, he had completed an important project for Innovatech that was set to bring in major contracts. He knew his contribution had been significant, and he expected at least some recognition from management. It was his 5-year anniversary at the company, and Jerome, as always, aimed to prove his value. Walking past colleagues who seemed to pay him no attention, he headed to the office of his boss, David Harris. Harris was known for his strict demeanor, but Jerome believed his achievements wouldn't go unnoticed. Thoughts of a possible promotion, or at least a letter of appreciation, swirled in his mind. When he knocked on the door and heard the brief, "Come in," Jerome had no idea what was about to happen. Upon entering the office, he saw that Harris didn't even lift his head from his paperwork. "Sit down, Jerome," he said curtly, pointing to the chair across from him. Jerome, full of anticipation, sat down, ready to discuss the project results. However, the first thing he heard made him tense up. "We have bad news. The company is forced to cut costs, and this affects some employees." Jerome frowned. "But what does that have to do with me?" he began, still unaware of the full gravity of the situation. Harris slowly raised his eyes and, staring at Jerome with a cold expression, said, "Your position is one of those being eliminated." The words hit like a verdict. "But I just completed a project that could bring the company millions," Jerome said with a voice full of outrage. He thought it was some kind of mistake, that his contributions couldn't simply be overlooked. Without blinking, Harris responded, "This decision was made at the executive level. It's out of my hands." His voice was indifferent, and it became clear that he had no intention of changing anything. Jerome tried to find an explanation. "Why me? I'm one of the leading engineers. My work was recognized as successful." Harris just shook his head without looking at him and added flatly, "Your work was appreciated, but it doesn't change the fact. Please pack your things and leave the office by the end of the day." Jerome was stunned. He sat still, feeling anger and disappointment rising inside him. But realizing that no words would change the situation, he stood up, gathered his belongings, and headed for the exit. As he passed his colleagues, some cast quick, puzzled glances at him, but no one offered any support. Outside, Jerome stopped, took a deep breath, and looked around. The day he had looked forward to with enthusiasm turned out to be one of the most humiliating of his life. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. Jerome left the Innovatech office with a heavy heart, but by the next day, his determination had found a new path. He spent the morning updating his resume and sending it out to potential employers, but luck was on his side much sooner than he expected. That same evening, he received a call from Marcus, an old friend and former colleague with whom he had started his career. Marcus, a black entrepreneur, owned a small but rapidly growing tech company. Upon hearing that Jerome had lost his job, Marcus couldn't resist offering help. "Look, I'm looking for a partner for a new project. I need someone with your experience and skills. Why don't you join me?" he suggested, not giving Jerome time to dwell on his next move. Still upset by his dismissal, Jerome saw this as not just an opportunity to continue his career, but to prove what he was capable of. He accepted Marcus's offer without hesitation. The first month working with Marcus was highly productive. Jerome introduced several key ideas for new products that soon became in demand in the market. Together, they signed a contract with a large corporation, which instantly elevated Marcus' company to the next level. This success meant not only financial stability for Jerome, but also recognition as one of the leading specialists in the industry. Before long, Marcus's company began expanding, attracting more and more investment. Jerome, now a full partner, felt that his contributions were not only recognized, but essential for the future. He was no longer just an engineer. He was involved in strategic decisions, building new departments, and negotiating with investors. Only 2 years had passed, but the success was undeniable. The company Marcus and Jerome built had become one of the most promising in the tech industry. Jerome looked at his achievement with pride, knowing he had managed to rise from injustice and prove his worth in a world that so often underestimated him. 2 years passed, and the company founded by Jerome and Marcus had transformed into a successful enterprise with major clients and steady investments. One day, Marcus called Jerome to an important meeting, and their conversation became a pivotal moment. "You won't believe it, but Innovatech is up for sale," Marcus said, looking into Jerome's eyes. The words sounded like a thunderclap. "They're on the verge of bankruptcy and selling off their assets. We can buy them," he added, studying Jerome's reaction. Jerome was silent for a moment. Memories flashed through his mind, how hard he worked on projects, how he was unfairly fired despite his accomplishments. Now, fate had given him a rare chance to buy the company that once rejected him. "This is our chance not just to expand the business, but to show that a system built on injustice is unsustainable," Marcus said, sensing Jerome's hesitation. Jerome felt determination swelling within him. This was a chance not for revenge, but to restore justice and prove his worth. Preparation for the buyout began immediately. Lawyers and consultants worked on the deal, and thanks to the success of their company, they quickly secured the necessary support from investors. Every detail mattered, and Jerome and Marcus meticulously planned every step. In the end, the deal was finalized, and Innovatech now belonged to those it had once underestimated. The day Jerome first returned to the Innovatech building, the building where he had once worked and been humiliatingly fired, had arrived. This time, he entered as the new owner. The employees looked at him in surprise and confusion, not understanding what had happened. The entire building was filled with a strange atmosphere. No one had expected such a shift. But the most significant event lay ahead: a meeting with David Harris, his former boss. Harris sat in his office, just as he had when he fired Jerome. Suddenly, he recognized Jerome entering the office with a confidence he had never seen in him before. "What are you doing here?" Harris asked, trying to mask his nervousness with a calm demeanor. He couldn't believe that Jerome, whom he had deemed expendable, was now returning in a different capacity. Jerome, maintaining his composure, slowly approached the desk. "This is my company now, David," he said firmly. "You once thought I didn't belong here, but today you'll see that bias and injustice are not only destructive to people, but also to companies." Harris was stunned, his face pale, and words stuck in his throat. This moment was symbolic. Jerome hadn't come for revenge. He didn't want to humiliate Harris despite the past. Instead, he offered him a resignation, saying the company needed change. Harris, realizing resistance was futile, accepted the decision to leave. After his departure, Jerome and Marcus began reforming Innovatech. They changed the corporate culture, implemented equal opportunity policies, and built a system based on inclusivity and fairness. What was once a symbol of bias and discrimination had now become a beacon for the entire industry. Jerome's story quickly spread through business circles. Innovatech had undergone a rebirth, made possible by Jerome's persistence, resilience, and belief that justice must prevail. After Jerome and Marcus completed the buyout of Innovatech, they set to work with a determination to change everything. The first step was reorganizing the team. Jerome held a meeting with key employees, explaining that the company would now operate under new rules based on fairness and equality. He knew that some might not accept the changes right away, but he was prepared for any challenges. During the transformation, Jerome faced resistance from some of the management who remained loyal to the old principles of the company. Some tried to sabotage the new initiatives, but Jerome, understanding that tough decisions were inevitable, took decisive action. The old guard, including those who turned a blind eye to discrimination, was replaced by new employees who shared his values. A key moment came with the adoption of equal opportunity policies and a transparent promotion system. Jerome personally took part in interviewing new candidates, focusing on professionalism and diversity. He wanted everyone to know, in this company, people would be judged by their abilities, not by the color of their skin or other prejudiced criteria. The company quickly began to recover. New employees brought fresh ideas, and with them came new contracts. The company's reputation began to change before their eyes, and soon Innovatech became a symbol of change in the tech industry. News outlets frequently mentioned Jerome's story, how he went from being unjustly fired to becoming the owner of the company, and how he transformed it into a model enterprise. One of the climactic moments occurred at a shareholders' meeting, when Jerome publicly presented his long-term strategy for the company's development. Among the attendees were those who had once doubted his abilities, but now they saw before them a man who, despite the injustice, had proven his strength and professionalism. He presented the company's performance. It was once again profitable, and its image had dramatically shifted. Today, we proved that change is not a threat, but an opportunity for growth, Jerome said in his closing speech. His words were met with loud applause. For him, this wasn't just a business triumph, but a personal victory over the systemic bias he had faced at the beginning of his journey. The company continued to grow, and Jerome became known as a man who not only overcame obstacles, but built a successful, fair, and thriving enterprise. His story became an example of how, through perseverance, support, and the right principles, one can not only overcome injustice, but also change an entire industry.